Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody. I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Eleanor Beaton. Eleanor is the founder of Savvy Media, an education and coaching company for women entrepreneurs. Through Savvy Media and the podcast Power, Presence, Position, Eleanor and her team are committed to advancing global gender equity through women's entrepreneurship. They're on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who scale past $1 million in revenue by 2030. Eleanor's work has been published or quoted in publications including The Globe and Mail, The Atlantic, CBC, Chatelaine, and so many more places. Please join me in welcoming Eleanor Beaton. Welcome, Eleanor.
It's such a privilege to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Happy to have you. And thank you for joining us from Nova Scotia, Canada. What a lovely place. I was there many, many, many years ago and really, really enjoyed it. So, Eleanor, take us back. On Work from the Inside Out, we like to learn about the early years, the formative years. We all started somewhere. Tell us a little bit about your earlier life and how those may or may not have been formative to where you are today.
I immigrated to Canada when I was 4 with my mom and my dad. My dad was an early professor. He was very young in his career, and he got a job as a professor of economics in this small university in this tiny little town on the east coast of Canada. So we moved over here. We'd been living in the United Kingdom. My mother was from the Fiji Islands.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it was a very global, like my dad graduated from university, goes over to the Fiji Islands, falls in love with a woman, takes her away from Fiji. That's how her family saw it, to the United Kingdom and then to Canada. So her family's literally on the other side of the world. And this is an important part of my story because when my mom and dad first met, she actually made more money than he did. She was a teacher. He was making $9 a week in the central planning office of the Fijian government, fishing to supplement his food. And she was an independent woman with her own money, well-educated. She had her own home. She bought fancy clothes. She had it all going on, and she falls in love with this guy. They go to the UK. I'm born. We go to Canada. And the culture is so different.
I bet.
And so she decides, okay, I'm going to stay at home, be a stay-at-home mom. And she was a stay-at-home mom for 18 years.
Wow.
And yeah, it created this financial inequality in my parents' marriage. And they had a wonderful relationship in many ways. And in this one way, in terms of like financial equality, what my dad said as the breadwinner, yes, he considered my mom's opinions and stuff, but when she really wanted to do something financially, she often couldn't do it. She wanted to she was had more of an investor mindset. She couldn't do it. So it was this imbalance and this inequity. And I can remember one day she was driving me to basketball practice and they have had some kind of disagreement about money. And she's gripping the steering wheel. My mom is a Black woman and her knuckles are like white. She is frustrated and angry. She's gripping the steering wheel so tight. And she says, Eleanor, money is power. Always make sure that you make your own. And so I can still feel that sort of fire in my belly around that. And I could see, how not having her own money impacted some decisions that she made. And even though there was so much about her life and that she enjoyed, this was this missing piece. And I would say that that making my own money, helping other women make their own money, seeing how wage inequality or financial inequality is at the heart of so much inequality in our world. That I think is really one of the sort of through lines of the work that I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, did your mom, and now you said 18 years she stayed at home.
Yeah.
Did she eventually go back and start?
She did.
Yeah.
She did. Like, I can remember, so she had to get retrained. Like, they didn't recognize at that time, it wasn't a straight, we're just going to recognize your certification. So she had to go back to school, recertify. And I can remember, so I'm 12 years older than my brother. And I can remember her nursing him, staying up late, finishing her papers. But, the example to me was determination.
Yeah.
It was acceptance. Like, okay, I already do have a degree. I understand that it doesn't work here, so I'm going to redo it. Like, I'm going to do what it takes to create a career. And so she did. And she had a good solid 15 years where she worked and had that part of her life. And things changed. Like, it created all kinds of differences in my household. By that time I was gone, so I didn't see it so much, but women and work, how work impacts their self-determination. The interesting thing is that my mom was also the person who suggested I try to find a career where I could be as independent as possible, like have a lot of freedom to really be in control of my schedule. And it was really that initial quest for time freedom that pushed me to entrepreneurship. So she was extremely influential. Yeah, that was a loaded question you asked me, Tammy. I was like, oh, I'm ready.
I love that. It's interesting that, when we talk about gender equity, there's so many layers and levels to that. And I want to get into that. I also, though, want to hear about how you stepped into that and where you went from, leaving home and how your career progressed. Because it sounds like your mother was a powerful influence and you witnessed firsthand. And we're not trying to demonize your father in the process either.
Yeah.
It sounds like your parents were doing what they needed to do at the time, but your mother was in a spot where, his credentials translated from the UK to Canada, no problem. And I've seen this a lot. I'm in the US. I've seen this a lot where people have these amazing credentials in their countries and they show up in another country and wrong, otherwise their credentials don't translate. And there's a lot of injustice on so many levels. So, good for her for just rolling up her sleeves and making that happen. So what kinds of things were you interested in, or what kinds of things did you step into earlier in your career?
So my very first, after university, my first career was really in advertising. So it was always I always had a communication skill, the ability to convey information clearly and concisely. And so I started out in public relations and advertising. So I'm working in advertising in a great agency, but I just felt like there was something more. And I think what I was craving was meaning. And there's lots of people that have very meaningful careers in the ad industry. It wasn't that, but meaning for me. So I found this newspaper. It was an arts newspaper, and I started writing articles. And they were not bad. I mean, now when I look back, they were really long. I probably took 1,000 words to say what I could have said today in 150 words. But, you got to start somewhere. So I was doing this work. I loved it. And so I said to my boyfriend, who's now my husband, I really like this. I think I want to go to journalism school.
Oh, wow.
So, So I went to journalism school. I did a 1-year journalism program. And I'm going to say, I think journalism, today, when you think about content, I mean, across every platform, it is all about, if the person who can create content has a huge advantage. So that skill set was really powerful. I learned how to write, how to edit. I learned what a headline was. I learned how to get information about things that I didn't know about before, how to tell a story, so that skill set was so powerful. And so when I graduated, I started to try to find a job in journalism. And I mean, journalism has changed. So this was over 20 years ago. Journalism has changed so much, but even then there weren't a lot of jobs. Right. And my husband, who came from a family of entrepreneurs, said, would you ever consider starting your own business? And now today, entrepreneurship is cool. But 20 years ago, I decided to start a business because I wanted time freedom. But honestly, Tammy, everybody asked me, there was just this feeling that starting a business was something losers did because they couldn't find a job anywhere. Like no one would hire them. Like this is what, I don't know how long you've had your business, but this was what it was like back then.
20+ years ago, I started.
Right? Yeah. Did you get that? No, your friends were more sophisticated, I think.
I wonder if, I think it's different when I started as a coach and no one knew what coaching was back then. I think being a writer, there wasn't a clear career path, as a full-time job as a writer. I think to be a writer, even though I love what you were saying about what you learned in journalism school, not just about how to write, but how to find information and how to craft a headline. I mean, I think there were so many aspects of what you learned in that situation that most of us wouldn't even think of. And so I could see where people might say, well, of course, she's a writer. She's going to have to, kind of make it up as she goes along or something. Yes. I don't know. Yeah. I could see where people might look at that as something that is, it's not a traditional career, let's say, right? And I could see where people might think of it differently back then. It's a whole different, as you said, it's a whole different world now.
Yes.
What do people know anyway?
Right. What do they know? What do they know? So that was business number one. And essentially what I was doing is it was really valuable because it was essentially a communications consultancy. Uh-huh. And so I made a job. And that was how I initially started selling stories. I sold communication services to government and different organizations. I sold articles and stories to publications. And I just kind of started to piece it together. And I was able to really practice my craft. I got good at what I was doing. I started to, every year, I grew the company a little bit. I started hiring kind of part-timers. But wow. The main thing that I really learned was how to sell. I learned, like, this was before there weren't really business courses or business classes. There wasn't as much, of a prescribed, this is how you're supposed to do this. So I really had to figure some things out. And it was a really powerful training ground. And I did start to specialize. So I started to specialize in business storytelling. Particularly the story behind the story of really successful entrepreneurs. And so I started interviewing like people who founded the country's fastest growing companies, all of this. And it became, on the one hand, it was like sort of like an entrepreneurship MBA, really learning strategies. And then there was this other part of me that just loved the people that I was, interviewing. And I started immediately applying what I would learn from these interviews to other aspects of my business and seeing results. And I absolutely was like, these guys are really smart, but they're not like geniuses. They're not like 10 times smarter than I am. I think I can do this. Like, I think I could create a company that I want, could potentially scale bigger than I have it. And so that was kind of on my mind. And at the same time, I was starting to feel a little bit stuck in the business that I had. And I can remember going to a writer's conference and meeting a lawyer. Her name was Cynthia, who had just given up her practice to become a writer.
Oh.
And she said, have you read The Artist's Way?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, no. So I hear about Julia Cameron's Artist's Way. And in the book, she talks about how often creative people take parallel careers. So people who actually want to be writing for themselves become journalists. This is not true of all journalists, but when I read that, I was like, this is me. So I started to realize a big part of the dissatisfaction I felt in my business at the time was because I had started a parallel business that was separate from what I actually wanted to be doing. I was using my skill sets to tell other people's stories, to advance other people's ideas, to help them craft their ideas as a ghost. By the end of it, I was being a ghost writer, writing like best-selling books. And I thought, I was dissatisfied. I was grateful for the business that I had, but dissatisfied, but I didn't have the courage to leave it. Didn't know how to leave it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Do you know what was behind that? Why you didn't have the courage to leave it? Did you know? I mean, you knew that you wanted to leave it, but something was holding you back, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think that, honestly, when I think about it now, I can see it. So I was very worried about what people in my life would say. I worried that they would say, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
I also didn't really know what it could look like. Again, this was sort of there were definitely blogs, like there were bloggers but now I think we live in a culture where we understand people's voices matter, people's opinions matter. At the time, it was, and I was really coming from a world where you pitched articles and other people would tell you, is your idea any good? Whereas now there's this ability to sort of directly put your opinions out there,
right?
For better or for worse, So I think it was that. I think it was fear about what people would say. It was also just being very new at putting my own original work out, because the second part of my business really started from blogging. I was writing about my experiences as a woman entrepreneur. I was writing about the experiences of losing my dad and, on the other side of his loss, actually taking my business, starting a new business, taking, it in a completely different direction. So there were, and it was really just, when I look back, I was a woman who was still tentative about using her voice. Yeah.
Wow. What turned the corner for you? Because clearly you did.
I did. Yeah, sure did. So this is, so basically the thing that really turned the corner for me was my father, shortly after the birth of my second child, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And so it was a very swift, serious cancer. He was gone in 6 months.
Oh.
So yeah, it was really sad. He was only 58 years old when he died. And so, what happened is that after he died, and I found my ambition just left me.
Yeah.
So before that, I'd been feeling this dissatisfaction in my previous business, but I still had this drive to grow. And all of a sudden I lose him. And, when you lose, like, grief is really interesting because you realize how much your identity is forged in relationship to key people in your life.
Yes, yes, yes.
So when they go, it's not just the absence of them, it's the absence of who you thought you were.
Yeah.
And so it did two things. One, I really felt lost. And so I basically put my business into maintenance mode. I just did what I needed to do to pay the bills, to serve the existing clients that I had. And I did a ton of walking. just walking on these country roads lined with wheat fields, like just walking and I don't even remember thinking that much. I just remember sort of being and really having this sense that I just needed to walk. And out of that, I had this desire to write a little personal essay. And so then I had the personal essay and I was like, it needs a home. And I'm sure as hell not going to try to pitch this to some magazine and have an editor tell me this piece doesn't belong. So I'm going to put it up on a blog. And then I shared that blog on Facebook. And I can remember the first time I shared a piece of my writing, I felt like throwing up.
I bet.
Right? Like I was just like, oh gosh, I hope nobody reads it. But then I noticed on the bloggers that I read, they had this thing called sign up for my newsletter.
Right.
So I was like, okay, so I put a sign up for my newsletter, zero strategy. And then I wrote another piece. And then week after week, I started writing, and I discovered something. I discovered that I had a voice. I discovered that I liked writing about focus and growth. I just kind of found this new direction. And at the time, as you said, like coaching, I'd hired coaches, but it was new still.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I think I like this area. There's something here. And so I did my training and got certified as a coach. And that's when I was continuing to write. And that's when I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to go full-time coaching. And shut down this other business. And so that was sort of big change, number one. And again, it came through writing and finding my voice, which actually gave me the courage to move into a new field that I'm pretty sure my dad wouldn't have approved of.
He would not have.
He was kind of old school. Yeah. Like he was definitely, like I remember I would watch Oprah Winfrey, and Oprah would have like authors who would be talking about things like, awareness and feelings. And he was a little bit old school and didn't really, he just kind of had that British stiff upper lip. People just need to get on with things, So again, I can imagine for people listening to this interview, especially who may be younger, like there was a time when people were like that. Some people still are, but there's so much more awareness, I think, of the breadth of human experience and all of that. But yeah, in his passing, there was a different kind of a freedom. And I was able to tap into that freedom through writing and rediscovering who I actually was, separate from relationships with anyone else.
Yeah. And it sounds like also the walks and the process of allowing your grief to unfold. There was something that emerged from you that was both, even though you were grieving, there was something being liberated from you too. It was almost like
totally
your dad's passing liberated you in some ways too. It
did.
Fact, but
yeah.
It does, what was your dad? Your dad was a professor. What was his discipline? What was his specialty?
Economics.
Aha. Okay.
Yeah. So we definitely grew up in the law of diminishing marginal returns and utility of resources and, all of this. And it was fun and interesting. And the funny thing is that even today, like, when I think and write about money and economics and its interplay with business, that's always where I feel great. You know what I mean? So there's still, there is that opportunity to, there's still this legacy there for sure. But I can remember while I was making this crossover from one business to the next, I was still writing business articles. And I can remember covering a conference. And one of the speakers, she was talking about women and money. And it was so interesting because I kept being drawn to women and money and business and career. But she was talking about something like financial planning for women. And I remember interviewing her for a follow-up piece in the magazine. And she talked about some of the work that she did with grief because it was related to her conference topic. And then often women outlive their husbands. And then, financial planning looks different. And she talked about the relief that when people lose someone that they love, like a parent, there is incredible grief and sadness. But there's this other thing that people almost never talk about because it feels so disloyal, but it is relief. And this sense that now you are, again, so much of who we are and how we define ourselves can be in relationship. I think especially as women can be in relationship to other people, that when that relationship disappears because the person is no longer here, there is this freedom to reinvent. Yeah. And I can remember when she shared that, to this day, I'm so grateful to her because it helped me understand what was going on with me. And I started to see the opportunity in front of me to really get to know myself and what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes complete sense. And, as you said earlier, there was this part of you that was hesitating, even though you were really dissatisfied. You were hesitating because you did wonder what people would think. Although it sounds like your husband's family was very encouraging of the entrepreneurial path, but that can look like a lot of different things, right? So I can see where, right, wrong, or otherwise, I don't care how old we are, our parents often have a certain kind of hold and influence on us. And it's not a blame thing. It's just comes with the territory to some degree for some of us. And I know what you're talking about for sure. But clearly that process for you was a real turning point, and it evolved, it sounds like. So, it wasn't like a huge, 360 turn, because there were elements of what you did that still tied in with the interviews that you had done with people. You had learned a lot along the way. I think that was the other thing that I was intrigued by, was that even though you were feeling dissatisfied, your business was actually doing well, it sounds like. So it's interesting to be dissatisfied with a business that's doing well. And as your business evolved and you were interviewing all these interesting business people, you had some people working for you, and you were still carrying through this sense of curiosity about people and about how they were developing their businesses and how they were growing. But somehow along the way, like you said, you were focused on everybody else's growth.
Yeah.
Right. And yet I can see where you were growing the business, but you weren't growing in the way you wanted to grow. But I can still appreciate the kind of curiosity you still brought to the work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting. I can remember as part of that, because there was always something in the work that I did that I found and I appreciated so much. So one time I was ghostwriting a book for a very famous woman in Canada. And as part of it, I interviewed this guy. His name was Stephen Cope, and he wrote a book called The Great Work of Your Life. He was the director of the Kripalu Institute.
Oh,
So he was a fascinating guy, right? Fascinating guy. And The Great Work of Your Life. And in it, the book, he says, when you're on your dharma, like there's your dharma and you can have a parallel path. And again, echoes of Julia Cameron, you can be on a parallel path, like just beside it. But the difference between being beside your purpose or your dharma and being right on it, that gap is that sense there's something missing.
Mm-hmm.
There's something missing. So there were always parts of that in earlier business that were sort of guiding. But the other thing I think about it too, that was helpful for me in making the transition was in writing, because basically that previous career was one creative project after another. And one of the things that I learned as a writer, and honestly, in that work, I wrote like 9 books. Thousands of reports and publications. It was a creative process.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is that when you're a creative process, you never know what the outcome can be.
That's right.
And so all you do is you take the next step and you try to keep developing your vision for what it's going to. But people say vision and they think that your vision starts like you're 100% clear. You're not. It's like a peak in the distance, and sometimes it's obscured by clouds. You keep trying to take the next step, hoping to be able to see it with more clarity. And I think that understanding of the creative process was so key as I moved into my next business, that that felt more like an unfolding. And I'm not going to say like it was easy. It was not. It has not been. Sometimes it's been incredibly frustrating, just like any creative journey.
Yeah.
But it was like an unfolding, and I was able to apply this skill set I acquired in my first business.
Yes.
Yeah, to the second one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the sense I'm getting from what you're saying, is that it's not like these were two completely different businesses. I think that's what I was saying about you took your curiosity with you. You just channeled it in a different way. And there was a huge piece of that, at least that's what I'm hearing, is this huge piece of this, that you had to get more curious about what you wanted, what you needed, right? So how long was it, or how long ago was it that you were really in the business that you're in now?
Yeah. So the business that I'm in now, there was like this crossover period, I'm going to say, of like 18 months.
Okay.
And that 18-month period went from like the second half of 2013 to 2015. And by 2015, the beginning of 2015, I essentially burned the boats. So I said, that is it. And what happened was I turned down basically like a 6-figure deal, a 6-figure contract on my other, because I was essentially doing like consulting, communications consulting by that point. So I turned down a 6-figure deal because at that point, the writer Pamela Slim talks about the loathing factor, like as a way to help you determine your next. My loathing, like you couldn't pay me enough money to keep doing what I had been doing in that old business. By this time, I was really ready to make the leap. And so I went full time into my coaching business in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Oh my gosh. Initially, it was great because I knew how to sell. And I knew how to write, and I had an audience from blogging. And so I would talk about what I did. And there was this sort of early rush of clients, and that was great. And then I remember getting panicky because my average deal size in my previous business was probably like $25,000. And when I first started coaching, like I can remember it was like, okay, I'm going to say my very first package I ever sold was like maybe $1,800. And I had to coach myself so hard to, and not even, because there were a few where I was selling like one-off sessions here and there. So they might've been like a few $100, like,
right.
And I remember thinking to myself, okay, was this a smart idea? Did you do this in the smartest way? But I had this experience as an entrepreneur and a belief. And I was just like, well, it doesn't matter if I did it in the smartest way, I'm doing it. And I'm going to be able to rely on myself to make this work.
Yeah. It was another learning curve, so to speak, right?
Sure was. Yeah.
So you moved full time into coaching, and one-on-one coaching were there. I assume there's other things that you've developed over time. Savvy Media, you have your podcast.
Yeah. So initially I was selling one-on-one coaching packages to women, generally women, and it was generally about either helping them advance their career or grow their business. Like those were generally the two things that they wanted to do. And so I was coaching, I was helping them uncover their answers and helping them, and really enjoyed it. And as I started doing that and writing, because writing helps me figure out what I think and where I'm going with things. And so I kept blogging and writing. And I soon found that the topics that I tended to gravitate toward tended to be anchored in what I was doing as a journalist, as a PR consultant, as an advertising account executive.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really about selling and marketing and positioning, and so I did a lot of work. I started to think through, doing research and noticing how my women, my women clients who were successfully landing promotions or growing their businesses, what were they doing? So it just naturally started to gravitate toward these topics that have been recurring themes like positioning, presence, power, like how women were doing this and how it looked different.
Right.
So I developed a program called the Leadership Lab. I started, so I did that. I went to my clients that I had sold individual packages to and invited them to come and do this. I started taking a couple of courses on how to sell and market. And then I started, just once a quarter, I would start a new cohort of this program. And then I'd finally had like 30 people go through the program. And then I decided to have a retreat. I can remember that was like a big deal. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have a retreat where people are going to come. So they came to a retreat. And then I remember at the retreat, I offered them if they wanted to come I decided to launch a mastermind. So I was like, do you want to come into my mastermind? Right. Some did. I was like, okay, now I have this program in a mastermind. And so it was very exciting. And when I look back on like my journals from that time, it was an exciting time. New things were happening. It was very challenging. I had all the cash flow crunches of, taking on programming and trying to do stuff like that. But it was very fun and exciting. But what I started to see, I was already headed like the Titanic toward the iceberg. Like I was on a course that would prove to be very difficult and led to one of my hardest years in business, which was 2018. And the reason that it was so hard was because I wasn't focused enough. So I was talking to women to help them advance in their careers. I was talking to women to help them grow their business. They're two very different things. And the way that in my mind, I was like, but we could all sit down and have dinner together and enjoy each other's company. But on a practical level, their struggles were different.
Yes.
And so then I was like, well, I think I'm going to need to start a second podcast to speak to them individually. Meanwhile, I was not even spending enough time with my kids as it was. So I can remember one Christmas holiday sitting down and planning out my year and saying, this is just, I can't do this.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So I decided to cut half, it was more than half, 60% of my audience were corporate women. 40% were women entrepreneurs. But the entrepreneurs in my business, this is not a blanket. And what I found is that I actually, when I looked at my top paying clients, they were all entrepreneurs. And so I made the decision. As I kind of burned the boats. I cut the Leadership Lab. I just immediately stopped talking to women in corporate. I emailed my list to tell them this would be happening. And I refocused my business exclusively around women entrepreneurs. It was scary. But, every time I have made a decision in my business that's anchored around focus and my own well-being, it has generally led to really good things. And that was when my business scaled past $1 million. It's when I felt that I was a lot more focused in my work. And again, I'd love to say happily ever after that. That's not the case. It's just different kinds of challenges, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, not to overuse the word focus, but to, it's a very clear point that, and I think you've shown it several times throughout your career. When you got focused and looked at your own well-being, that's when you got that much clearer about what direction to go in. And, speaking of inside out, from that point of view, you were listening to your gut. And it wasn't, my hunch is, my theory would be that you were looking at your revenues, but my hunch is also that working with the women entrepreneurs was also feeding your soul in some ways as well.
Yeah. It was, it really was. It absolutely was. And, it's interesting. And that's one of the reasons that I love your show so much, because I'm only interested in working from the inside out. It's the only way, and it's actually like a huge thing that I think I've often done it implicitly.
Mm-hmm.
So just find myself doing things, or I can't drop something, or I'm not procrastinating on something because I don't actually want to do it. Now, what I have found has been that, to me, the big shift that I've made in my work in the last few years has been really learning to trust myself, really learning to check in first, like really ask myself, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Truly, like what are your intentions and goals at this time of your life? What this thing that you want, what is it actually going to take? And do you want to make space and room for what it's going to take or not? And if you don't, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think earlier in my career, I didn't think, I just, basically earlier in my career, my strategy was, give yourself 60% of the time and resources that you need, and just make up for the rest with vigor, charisma, and zest, and flair. And that is fine for a week or so.
Yeah.
But it's not actually an effective growth strategy.
Right. And that's probably what led to your feeling dissatisfied. You were going more the explicit external route. But it's hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it?
Well, and it's so interesting because I've asked myself this question. So I have this thing now where I really, I'm at this place in my life personally where I really do ask myself, what is it that I want? And if something is going to be in my life, I will make the space for it, or I'll try to. We're always sort of failing on the things we want to do to a degree. So doing it imperfectly. And if I'm not willing to make space for it, then I won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, I look at the younger woman who is trying to build her business. I don't know that that was even an option for her. I think, now it's an option. It wasn't always.
No.
Yeah. So that hindsight is so, I think it's important and powerful to have it. And, I also think for me, sometimes it's useful to look back and be like, you know what? I don't think I could have done what I did today. I wasn't in the same position to make the same choices. Yeah.
You didn't have the life experience behind it either. You have the perspective. I think that even when we look back on all the things that we did in the past, those things that at one point might have felt good or became, there's some things we started doing that felt good and then maybe they became dissatisfying, but everything you've done up till now has led you to where you are. I know that sounds so profound.
That is so true.
So profound, but it's true, right? And so, you get to take that all with you. It's all served you. So I'm curious, who are you working with today? I know it's women entrepreneurs, but who tell us a little bit about, without divulging anything, private, but tell us a little bit about what it looks like today and the podcast and how people can find you and all those good things.
Well, to kind of bring it full circle, it took me time and skill and like developing the various abilities that I would need to do this. But I think back on my mom and the whole money is power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about also the conversations that we had about really making sure that the container you create with your work is one that allows you to have the life you actually want to have. And those two are like this, they became, like Robert Frost saying, like the net, like having a field of play, like that for me became a really powerful field of play. And so today, Safi Media, everything we do is connected to the mission of advancing a model of economic growth that nourishes the planet, one woman-owned business at a time. Everything, right? Absolutely everything. Who we hire, the clients that we work with. And so the way that we do that is by supporting women entrepreneurs to create what we call jewel businesses. So there, in the tech world, we have things like unicorns. So companies that have $1 billion valuation. And I can remember being at a conference and explaining what I did. And one of the tech entrepreneurs really wrote it off like a lifestyle business, but this was not a compliment. And I was, thinking about how most of the entrepreneurs at that conference would blow through millions in funding, never actually generate a profit, and that would be called a good thing. Meanwhile, like so many of the women that I was working with would be creating successful but small businesses, contributing to their communities, employing people, giving them good pay, good holidays, lots of flexibility. And I was like, it's so interesting how our efforts aren't considered on the same par at the same level. And I was like, I wonder if that's because of the difference that, defining what that business is. And so I was like, I started to do research with women entrepreneurs about what they wanted. I started looking at entrepreneurs that I was working with who had the most fulfillment and who had true independence. And I found that they were creating businesses where, in general, their top line was growing at around 30% or more or less, depending on what they wanted. So 30% per year growth until such time as she wanted to accelerate or decelerate, a 30% profit margin, which would allow her to build a financial fortress and reinvest back in growth, and 30% open unscheduled time.
Mm-hmm.
And designing a business in this way really led to maximum cash influence and autonomy for that woman. And so all of our programming today, our 2 core coaching programs, are really built around this. Because our mission is to double the number of women entrepreneurs who scale past 1 million, because I don't think as a world we yet really believe that economic growth and sustainability go together, because all we see is the opposite of that, And so I think having women entrepreneurs are so well positioned to do this work. And that's the work that I do today. We have a ton of free educational resources through things like podcasts and masterclasses. We have an arm of our business that does consulting work with governments and NGOs who are trying to advance women entrepreneurs. So we're really, the business exists to solve a problem or provide, not necessarily solve a problem, but bring together women to provide examples, of how to grow the economy and advance growth in a different way.
That's powerful, really powerful. And how can people find out more about all of this?
Well, I think a great place is to go to the Power Presence Position podcast. That's my show, Power Presence Position, or to go to my website, eleanorbeaton.com.
All right. Well, we will have all of that in the show notes. And is there anything else you want to add before I ask my last bonus question?
I think I'll add that for me, really making the time and taking the space to know who I am, and really giving myself the space to allow myself to express who I am through the life that I live has been one of the most that's how I've been able to work from the inside out.
Mm.
And it's truly like the other way sucks. And just from a business, like just from a practical, it's hard to scale a business you don't love. It's really hard.
It's hard to scale yourself as a person if you're living a life you don't love. I appreciate that so much. So, final question is, so if you had to give somebody one key piece of advice, although you've already given a tremendous amount of insight and advice already throughout this conversation, and I'm so grateful for it, Eleanor. But someone who's thinking about what's next for them, whether they're an entrepreneur, whether they're thinking about their next job, whatever it is, what would be a key piece of advice you would give them as they're beginning to think about making a transition?
I would say, and this goes back to my work as a coach, my own experience, and my work as a journalist, your life contains all of the clues, and that, going back and maybe reading through your journals, if you've been a lifelong journaler, like I have been, like studying the things that make you happy, studying the places where you feel where success has felt effortless, really, truly understanding yourself, and looking for those clues that are already in your own body of work.
Love that.
Can be so powerful and genuinely helpful.
Yeah. Great advice. Eleanor Beaton, this has been a joy and a pleasure and an inspiration. And I thank you so much for being here today. We have all of your links to your website, your podcast, your social media. It'll all be in the show notes. And I hope people will take a good look at all the resources you offer. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Eleanor Beaton. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her journey and current professional endeavors. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 194. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Eleanor, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I would so appreciate reading your written review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions there. You can also help sustain this podcast. Buy me a cup of coffee. Yeah, you can go to buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. This podcast is self-funded, and I would so appreciate your support. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.